Hi there. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. I hope it's as enlightening as you hope it will be. A while back, me and my wife joined the Joseph Bannister's website and newsletter. If you're not familiar with who Joe Bannister is, I'll put up this video for you. And we'll you watch it for a minute, and I'll be right back.
Well, I'm gonna have to jump through this real quick so we stay on schedule, because I'm the guy before lunch, and I don't want to make any more enemies than I may already have. The title of my talk is Favorite Fed Enemy of the State in 11 Years Flat. 1993 is when I began with the IRS. 2004 is when I was indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. So that's an 11-year period. Or I could also call it Your Worst Nightmare, an Accountant with a Gun. That was our class t-shirt in training. That's a job I did for 5.5 years, a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. This was a photo taken at the East Palo Alto, California Police Academy. I'm sorry, Citizens Police Academy. This is my family. On your left, my brother John. He's a lieutenant in the California Highway Patrol. My baby brother Jeff is next. He's an officer with the San Jose, California Police Department. My mother's in the middle, Ann, and my father passed away in 1993, otherwise he would have been in the picture too. Next is my brother Jim. He is a battalion chief in the Daly City, California Fire Department. And then that pencil neck guy over there with the little treasury badge is me. That's my Uncle Gary, 30 years with the Santa Clara County, California Sheriff's Office. Well, back when I realized that after having graduated from San Jose State and getting an accounting degree and becoming a certified public accountant, that there's no way that I could continue to be an accountant for 30-year career, I decided that I needed a little more excitement in my life, and so I applied to both the FBI and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Now, of course, the FBI, at least up until maybe the last 10 or 20 years or so, had a pretty good reputation. I mean, who doesn't want to be an FBI agent? Sheriff Max talked about his father being an FBI agent, and Sheriff Mack maybe having that inkling himself. But I also had a friend who worked for the IRS for many years and talked to me about the Criminal Investigation Division, and their primary claim to fame was having caught Al Capone, or at least they claim all the credit for it, but I guess they kind of have to hunt around for some credit so that people will like them. Their motto there is, be an accountant with conviction. Anyway, I decided to, long story that I can't get into about why the FBI didn't work out. I did qualify to go to Quantico, Virginia to be a FBI special agent, but because of a hiring freeze, couldn't quite make it. Meanwhile, the IRS contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in a special agent position in the San Francisco, California office, and I accepted that, and in November of 1993, I was sworn in and went to training, quite an extensive training, about 16 weeks in Glencoe, Georgia. And in case there's any allegations out there that I was just one of those bozo agents who just went sideways, I don't mean this to brag, but just for a little extra evidence that I really took the job seriously and worked very hard at it. I achieved a 95% academic average in training. I was the class president of both training classes. I received a memorandum of appreciation for my service as president. He described my service as having faithfully discharged the extra duties of being president of the class. So after training, well, actually I should say before I even went to training, I had an interesting experience that taught me about the culture inside the IRS. I had no cases to work on because it was my first day, and so I grabbed a copy of the Internal Revenue Code, which they happen to have on my shelf, and if anyone's ever seen one, it's pretty darn thick. So I turned to the criminal sections, the 7000 series, and was actually reviewing them, and my boss, Alex, who was a former Marine, he comes and barks at me and says, what are you doing? And I looked up at him and I said, well, I'm just researching the statutes that I'm actually going to be investigating and seeking prosecution on. And he said, you need to put that book away. You're no longer a CPA, you're an IRS special agent, and you don't need to be looking in that book. He also had a problem with, on my business card, actually when you're a CPA, you're supposed to be able to put it after your name in any correspondence or things like that. So put it on my card, and he didn't like that either. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but something having to do with thinking and researching, things that I did as a CPA prior to going in the IRS, wasn't very welcome there. If I had the time, I'd show you all my home videos about my swearing-in ceremony, but I'll just give you just a picture. It really meant a lot to me, and unlike most IRS swearing-in ceremonies, where they'll probably have a room this size with this many people, raise your right hand, it's not very serious, but it really meant a lot to me, and I will always know and remember the words that I swore an oath to. And I know that you're all familiar with the oath, and might be slight changes between federal and state, but I'm sure the same wording is used, especially there at the end. As far as my what I would call my pre-enlightenment days at the IRS, when I was in the mindset of I want to use my financial skills, my training to serve my country, protect the U.S. Treasury, I guess about as naive as one could be in terms of his goals. But again, just to point out that I was not a slug while I worked there. I rose to the highest level of a GS-13 before my 5th year employment anniversary. I earned the Superior Performance Award, the Sustained Superior Performance Award, Top Athlete Award. I was the Asset Forfeiture Coordinator for the Central California District, the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force Coordinator for the Central California District, and a Firearms and Defensive Tactics Coordinator. So you might think that that looks like a rewarding career as an IRS special agent. And I consider this my enlightenment process, which I'm going to have to go through very quickly. But basically, I was an avid listener of talk radio in the San Francisco Bay Area, and a talk show host had this guest. Some of you may have heard of her, D.V. Kidd. And she was talking about the federal income tax and the monetary system and the New World Order and Agenda 21 and all these different kinds of issues. And at that time, I was still like, aren't those people kooks? But I was able to see through that and just listen, because this particular host was quite provocative. He wasn't about what is or who is right or wrong, but just what is right or wrong. A very constitutionally minded gentleman named Jeff Metcalf. But after D.V. Kidd made this presentation about the federal income tax, I kind of took offense at it. I mean, she even said that the federal income tax was largely a voluntary system. And the IRS gave me a Sig Sauer 9mm and bulletproof vest and shotgun training, and I thought to myself, lady, this tax ain't voluntary. But I kind of looked at myself and I thought, well, okay, I could just pinch myself, but I've achieved a certain amount of education and experience and training, and why does the stuff that she said, maybe I should look into it more and use my skills to do so. If she's lying, then I'm going to expose her for lying. If she's not lying, then I'm going to expose whoever is lying. So as any trained investigator would do, I decided I'd utilize investigative training to seek out the truth, gather evidence, interview witnesses, present evidence to the appropriate personnel. I did this on my own time. I interviewed people that the IRS called tax protesters. I reviewed more in depth the Internal Revenue Code, Code of Federal Regulations, court cases, and I took a closer look at IRS enforcement. In the IRS booklet, publication 17, it's interesting that they say this publication covers some subjects on which a court may have made a decision more favorable to the taxpayers than the interpretation by the IRS. Until these differing interpretations are resolved by higher court decisions or in some other way, this publication will continue to present the interpretation by the IRS. So this is a report that I prepared basically after about a 1.5 to 2 year period of evenings, weekends, trying to get through this mountain of material to determine who was telling the truth. I put some of the highlights of what I had encountered into a report that I entitled Investigating the Federal Income Tax, a Preliminary Report. The allegations, due to constitutional limitations, most Americans are not required to file income tax returns and pay income tax. 16th Amendment was not ratified, and the U.S. government finances its operations through the creation of fiat money, not with revenue from income taxes. I gave my supervisors a letter along with my report, and suffice to say, or this particular sentence, if the service declines to conduct its own analysis or dismisses the evidence in this report without proper review, then I must tender my resignation. My oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States was made to God, and I cannot serve two masters. Well, to say that my presentation fell on deaf ears would probably be an understatement. I got a memorandum from my chief, who's now called a special agent in charge. IRS will not be responding to your request and will provide you with the necessary paperwork to tender your resignation. So sample fact, I can't get into all the details, but the average working American is not liable to pay the federal income tax. The law clearly states that only Americans who are liable for the income tax are required to keep records and file returns. And in case you're wondering if the IRS agrees with what the law requires, you might check out their Disclosure, Privacy Act, and Paperwork Reduction Act in the tax booklets. They refer to these sections and say that those sections say that you must file a return or statement with us for any tax you are liable for. So the IRS agrees. Well, after coming to, I had to come to some kind of a conclusion because I really didn't expect to arrive at the conclusion that I did, which was that the IRS was knowingly, at least at the upper levels, knowingly deceiving the American public and stealing their property. And so I had to look at what the IRS's own written policies and principles were in case somehow my upbringing, the ethics that my parents taught me, the ethics of the CPA profession somehow didn't give me enough ammunition as to what to do. I went to look at what the IRS said I should do. And you can see that they taught us, among other things, the core ethical principles. Many of them I'm sure you're very familiar with. I won't go through them. And of course, the words to the oath, which you all have memorized. Well, they basically gave me an opportunity to either, they didn't fire me, the IRS didn't fire me, but they basically said, hey, come back in a week, we're going to put you on administrative leave and let us know what your decision is. So I thought, you know, I've earned a pretty good reputation here, and one of the things that helps you to be believed is having a good reputation, so I didn't want them to tarnish that, and I believed that the best thing for me to do was to resign. So I prepared a resignation letter, addressed it to Commissioner Rosati, who was the commissioner of the IRS at the time. And again, just to summarize, based on the obvious futility of continuing to work for an agency that has standards and practices so different from what it professes, and standards and practices so contrary to my own, I'm officially resigning from the position of IRS Criminal Investigation Division Special Agent, effective as of the date of this letter.
Joe Bannister, ex-IRS agent, gun-toting enforcement agent, found out that the IRS is doing this all wrong. There is no law that makes it mandatory for us to pay this taxes. And there's a very good reason why. And I'll get to that here in just a second. But what I wanted to get at to start with is me and my wife joined the Joe Bannister's website and newsletter. Shortly thereafter, he sent us an email that had this document. This was a document that tells you how to handle your W-4 forms from your employer, how to get them to stop withholding money for the taxes. Okay? And in this, it says that it's not required. Now you can see the highlighted part, and it says not required, and tells them how to handle it. This page is actually from the IRS manual that Joe Bannister had. Okay? And it tells the IRS or agent, and those who are doing the taxes, how to handle it. That this is, you know, that is not required, and if they don't get a W-4 form, there's got to be some sort of documentation explaining it. Okay. Well, in a situation like this, in any kind of, what do you call it? Okay. I'm looking into this. Anybody talks about this, about the IRS and trying to do certain things legally, you need to look things up. Always. Okay? And so, I tried to find this document online on the current IRS website. Okay? And this is what I got. A little bit different. It doesn't have the section that says it's not required. They changed it up a little bit. And so, now, since it doesn't say it, I felt that if I tried showing the other document that Joe Bannister had given me to my employer, they would go look it up themselves and see the new document. And it doesn't say that anymore. So I questioned Joseph Bannister on that, and he kind of said that it's still enforceable. This is the way it's supposed to be. They just kind of left it out. They omitted it, but it's still there. It's still not required. But that's aside, okay? Because he also sent me another document. Called the assumption of liability. The front cover doesn't look like this. I made this front cover, and I printed up like 90% of it. I've still got a few of the exhibits in the back of this document. I need to print it up yet. But anyways, this document from an ex-IRS agent has everything I will need to actually keep the IRS off my back when I decide to go through with all this stuff. Right now I can't, and I'm going to explain why, because even the very first chapter of this book pretty much explains the whole thing in one simple matter. Technically, this document was written by a Stedman Jackson back in 2001. Okay, me and my wife tried to look him up in any way, shape, or form so we could thank him for writing such a rather extensive document and having plenty of exhibits or proofs, documents that he sent out to get in contact with the IRS and all that. But we couldn't find him, so we're thinking it was Stedman Jackson might be an alias. Anyways, if Stedman Jackson happens to be watching this, I just want to say thank you very much. This is awesome work. And it comes from Joseph Bannister. And if Joseph Bannister looked at it and agrees with it, I'm going to give this document some rather high credibility. Alright? So I'm going to get started here real quick. The very first part of this book discusses citizenship. U.S. citizenship versus American citizenship. Are you a U.S. citizen or an American citizen? Be careful how you answer that, because when it comes down to law and law books, most law books like to redefine the definitions for practically every chapter, every section. So you cannot assume you know what they're talking about. This legalese you hear about, it's a language that changes at the will of whoever wrote the law. I mean, a definition can change, a word's definition can change throughout the entire title of the book. Alright? But starting with citizenship, in Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, there are 3 definitions to United States. Okay? And this is kind of where they catch you. Here's the 3 definitions. Number 1, it may be the name of a sovereign occupying the position analogous to that of other sovereigns in the family of nations. Kind of how the UN sees us. On a global scale, we are U.S. citizens. So that technically does apply to us on a global scale. Number 2, it may designate territory over which the sovereignty of the federal government extends. Okay? I want to bring this up make sure you understand this. This is the Constitution. I have this book. I have the Constitution with me. I want to make sure you understand that in our United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, subparagraph 17, says Congress shall be able to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square. Our Constitution says 10 miles square, not to exceed 10 miles square. Okay? They get to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over a District of Columbia, that may not exceed 10 miles square. Okay? As may, by secession of particular states. And back when this was written, there were like 13 states, so they were expecting a couple of states to secede some property in order for it to be the seat of the government. Okay? And I believe it was Virginia. I'm reading another document that says Virginia did secede some property. I think it was Virginia, yeah. Anyways. But by secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Okay? That article 1, Section 8, subsection, subparagraph 17, applying to definition number 2, says it may designate territory over which the sovereignty of the federal government extends. Okay, 10 miles square, alright, it's not to exceed that. So the federal government is locked into this, except for other areas that they purchase. Guam, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and another island out there I don't remember off the top of my head. But though they purchased them, that is now, territory over which the sovereignty of the federal government extends. Is Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. That's technically it. Okay? And it says so in our Constitution. Alright? That is their limit of their jurisdiction. That's as far as they're supposed to go. Okay? For legislation power, to legislate anything they want within the District of Columbia. Exclusive legislation over anything whatsoever. They can do whatever they want. That 10 mile square plus whatever they buy. Alright? Number 3, for the definition of the United States. The name of the 50 states of the Union, which are united by and under the Constitution of the United States of America, ratified in 1789. Okay? Got it right here. Okay, that's the proper definition for what we are, basically locally within our own country. Okay? We are supposed to be free. But the problem is this, folks. There are 3 definitions for United States. Okay? So, if I say I'm a United States citizen or U.S. citizen, and I leave it at that, it's kind of ambiguous, right? That there's 3 definitions. Which of the 3 are you? Okay, and on any legal document or in any court in America, if the document asks, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" you check off yes, and that's it. Or in a courtroom, if they ask you, "Are you a U.S. citizen, a United States citizen?" and you just say, yes I am. Guess what? The courts will always pick number 2. And on the legal documents, whatever the government agency, they get to pick. Number 2. Because you didn't specify. And because you didn't specify, Congress has legislative, they get to exercise legislation whatever they want. Because now they're trying to tell you, they're making you a citizen of what? Basically of Washington, D.C. or just of their territory. By doing this, by you just saying yes, and that's it, the courts get to assume you are on territory over which the sovereignty of America, sovereignty of the federal government extends. And when they do that, the Congress gets to legislate whatever they want. Exclusive legislation. And they get to make any and all rule, anything they want. Statutes and whatnot. They make up all these statutes. And it is perfectly legal then to tax you. There's nothing unconstitutional about it. You are under the sovereignty of the United States government. Because you didn't specify. Alright? Not sure what else to say about this. There's more about this because this document really likes to get into the tax system. Okay? And we'll get into this in a little bit. The biggest point I need to make about this is this, at the very beginning, this is where they pretty much get you. By claiming that you're a U.S. citizen, they get to presume in the courts and on those documents that you are within the jurisdiction of the federal government. There is a way to get out of this. Joe Bannister also included an affidavit that you can use to send in to the Attorney General, the President, the IRS, the Social Security Administration. You send it to them, you basically expatriate as a U.S. citizen and reclaim and restate that you are still an American citizen. And I'm going to put the definition of American citizen up over here, which is not ambiguous as a U.S. citizen. Okay? And anytime you can work with the legal system, you almost need to include this definition. Okay? You need to know you are an American citizen and you are not under the jurisdiction of the federal government while you're out here walking around in one of the 50 states. The Constitution itself says 10 miles square. It is not to exceed that. That's the jurisdiction of the federal government. They can do whatever the hell they want inside that jurisdiction. Okay, outside of that, they have no real power unless we give it to them. And they've sucked us into it by making us believe we are U.S. citizens and not telling us there was 3 definitions. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that right now.